you've seen them every day since.
Yeah, I never lost them again. I learned how to be a mom. I learned how to pay bills. I learned how to keep them fed. I learned how to love them when I didn't know how to be loved.
Back in it, baby, just in a town. I'm on the edge, I ain't coming down. I get too high, I'm afraid
Thank
of
you
the
for
ground.
coming on. Welcome to the Garbage to Gold podcast. First one ever.
Yeah.
What do you want to talk about first? You want to start just at the beginning, kind of how life story, how you got into what you're doing now?
I mean, we can.
Okay.
So I was a product of a really bad environment growing up. Family was divided, a lot of mental health issues on my mom's side of the family. Dad who struggled with addiction. A lot of trauma in the house.
Keep going. I just gonna
Went through things like homelessness at a young age, being sexually abused, abandonment issues, moving around a lot, raising my siblings. Life was just a lot, and I really hated who I was and everything about my life. So I fell into using around the age of 11.
What year were you born? Like, how old are you?
84, I'm 40.
Okay.
So
How early on did you start to realize that things weren't really normal?
that's, I don't know which part. What do you mean, like, not normal? Because, like, if you're talking about, like, my environment and the things I was going through,
Right.
it probably wasn't until way later in life because it was the only thing I knew.
Right.
I grew up in it. Actually, it was more uncomfortable for me going to normal people's homes where the family was healthy. Like, that didn't make sense to me.
Right.
So I like really hid a lot of who I was because I felt like I didn't fit in the rest of the world.
Right.
So, but it was still more as uncomfortable as I was with people knowing what would possibly be going on in my home or in my life. It was still more normal for me to be living in that messy life than it was to be in healthy environments.
Right. So your mom and dad weren't married, or they stayed together throughout your childhood?
My parents were married. They were very toxic for each other. They got separated. So when my mom and dad separated, my dad was in the military for a while, and we lived in Louisiana.
Oh, okay.
And my mom took us to like a shelter. I don't really know what type of shelter. I was too young to process that information at the time. I don't know if it was like an abuse shelter or, but I know that we had gone there and stayed there for a while.
Was she with you, or did she just take you guys there?
She was with us.
Oh, okay.
And then somehow along the way, my dad came down and picked us up and brought us back to Missouri and dropped us off at some family's house. And that's where we stayed for a while until my mom came back to Missouri.
What year do you think that was?
Oh, man. I was probably second grade at that point.
So early 90s.
Yeah. And then we lived with her for a while, but at that point, you could already tell she wasn't normal with her mental health. My mom struggles with bipolar schizophrenia. What she did, she just passed away a little over a year ago, and so she just never was really present for us. And I carried a lot of shame for who my mom was. I was very embarrassed by that. So
was she an addict, or was she just had too many mental health?
I know that at one point in her life she was using alcohol and cocaine with my dad, but I don't know if she was actually a full blown addict like my dad.
Okay. So dad was full blown.
Yeah.
What was his what was he using? Anything, everything, or
alcohol, meth, cocaine.
Okay.
He kind of stayed in that.
So they were together when you got back into Missouri?
No. When I got back to Missouri, my parents were still separated. My dad was living with my grandma, and he dropped us off with my mom's sister, my aunt, and we stayed with them for a while till my mom came back.
And then what happened when mom came back?
Well, we moved in with my grandparents, lived with mom for a while, and my dad was getting us on the weekends, and then one weekend he picked us up and went and filed for full custody. So when mom showed up to pick us up, he told her that we couldn't live with her, and that was the last weekend I seen her for like 5 years. She took off
Oh damn.
and disappeared for like 5 years.
So then you're stuck with your dad, who did you know he was using at the time, or is this stuff that you found out later?
I found out about the drugs later. I knew he was pretty hardcore in the alcohol though.
Yeah. So was he pretty present in your life then? Or just kind of.
So, my dad was my abuser.
Mm.
And when he was home, it was a lot of partying. It was a lot of people
People
a little
coming
bit
and
older
going.
than me, but way younger than him, or people he worked with. There was always
Right.
drinking going on, people hanging out in the bedrooms. So I didn't still process necessarily that drugs were a thing, but alcohol was very, very present in our life. And when he was home, that is what it was.
So how many brothers and sisters do you have?
I have 2 brothers and 1 sister.
Okay, and you guys all stayed together with your dad?
Yeah.
What town were you living in?
Well, we bounced around. So when a lot of that was going on, we were living in Pacific, Gray Summit, Villa Ridge area.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty close to where we are now in Union.
Yeah.
So, did you graduate high school or anything?
I did, barely.
Barely.
So I had found like this escape, right? I found this guy and he was like my ticket out. And I'd gotten pregnant in high school with my daughter, and we decided we were going to be a family, and I had moved out before I graduated. I also had my first felony before I graduated, and had spent my first week in jail, and I did it all for love.
Right.
And I had my daughter, and so it was really hard because I already skipped a lot of school, and then I got pregnant, so then I had to miss a lot of school, and all the odds were stacked against me. Nobody thought I would succeed. But my daughter did get to see me graduate, so that was pretty cool. Not that she's going to remember that,
Right.
but it happened.
Is your daughter is she graduated yet, or?
Yeah, she's graduated and gone to college, She's working a good job.
So did your addiction ever cause problems with your ability to keep her?
My kids were taken by the state twice.
Dang.
Yeah.
So how quickly after your first child was born, were you using when they were before they were born?
Yeah, so I had started using, like I said, when I was 11, and when I got to high school, it had escalated to like pills and meth and
Did you start off just smoking weed, I guess?
I was taking pills, smoking weed, and drinking, but I escalated to like Oxycontin, Percocet, not just like Xanax and other pills when I was in high school. My dad was my first meth dealer too, as well. And
so you, at 11, you start using
alcohol and
everything?
marijuana. No, just alcohol and marijuana. And
so
then by the time I was like 15, I was taking prescription medications.
So, you're 11 years old, and your first time smoking weed and drinking, was it at your dad's house, or were you with some friends?
Well, so the alcohol I stole from the house because, our fridge stayed stocked. Actually, it was kind of funny because at first I thought it was soda the first time I had drank because it was like Purple Passion and it was in a 2-liter bottle. So I didn't know necessarily the difference.
Right.
But after the first drink, I knew that I wanted more and I knew it wasn't soda at that point. And so I started drinking with the friends. I hung out with a lot of kids that were older than me by a couple years.
Were they all in your neighborhood, or did you meet them at school, or both?
Both, but mostly in my neighborhood.
Yeah. And then I guess Dad didn't have like super strict supervision on you, or is he just kind of like?
If he was around, he's intoxicated.
Right.
He tried to be controlling, but he was more not around than he was.
So, you mentioned that he was your abuser. Like, were you guys like, what level to abuse? Like, did he just hit you, or was it?
He mentally, physically, and sexually abused me growing up.
Damn. So, do you have any contact with him still today, or was any of that ever reconciled, or?
I have minimal contact with him. He's still a very sick, twisted, toxic person. It was a secret that I kept most of my life until I got in recovery, and I don't know with my siblings if that's something they experienced too, because in my mind I felt like I was protecting them from it.
Do you not have much contact with him?
I do, but it's very minimal.
Mm.
My brother struggles with mental health really bad too. The drugs kind of triggered that for him. My other brother, he moved to Springfield and got into a program, so he's been in recovery for a few years now and has his kid. And then my sister is a mess. I lost her, and I just found her. She's been missing for like 2 years, and I just found her, and her mental health's not really good. She's been living in a trailer, homeless, basically, no electric, no water, things like that.
It's not good.
Mm-mm. No, the trauma really affected the whole family.
So what was it just he was just partying all the time? What was like the wildest thing? What do you think caused like the most like trauma that you know?
Like for all of us.
Yeah. Or was it just like
Well,
no
he wasn't a dad. Like we went.
Right.
There were so many days we went hungry.
right.
There were days we lived without electricity. There was days that we lived for a couple months in like a house that had burned down because he could not provide for us. He made sure to stay alive, but he could not provide for us.
Right.
So
Did family services ever come in? Or?
they did, and we would lie to them because we were told that if we told the truth, we would be separated, and
Right.
all of those manipulation things that happen when you're a kid.
Did he ever have like a girlfriend or anything that you liked, or were they all like
I always liked when he had a girlfriend because then I didn't have to worry about him.
right touching you or something?
Yeah.
Damn. So, and we don't have to really like dig too deep
I
into
don't really
that.
mind. I've taken
but-
my power back with my story.
Right. And you don't know if he did any of that to your other siblings. You didn't see it. It was mainly just you. Were you the oldest? I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was the oldest, and I don't know. It's not a topic we've actually like. I think so because of the way we've escaped the surface about it, but not actually ever had those conversations. None of us have directly been like, and we've all kind of blamed each other, for the things we went through growing up. Like we had gotten put against each other as we got older.
It's crazy how common that is. Because I watch a lot of other podcasts that interview people who've been through some wild things, especially through their childhood, and it's really common for kids to be in a terrible situation, but then they kind of band together to like kind of keep themselves there out of fear. And it's it's always the same thing, like, hey, if you say something, bad things are going to happen to you. And that's one thing that I want to kind of bring to light to audiences is like a lot of people are like, why wouldn't you just go say something? It's not really that easy.
It's not. And then there's also like that guilt and that shame, and like everybody's gonna look at you different, and they're gonna blame you and treat you like you're beneath them, and just like you feel like a part of you is taken from you, and you lose your identity with that.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough I never experienced anything real crazy like that. But a lot of my friends did, but I didn't know like when we were children that was going on for them. But I did you ever feel like if you told somebody that then it would make it more real? Like then it was like, did you ever feel like, if you didn't tell anybody, then it was kind of like it wasn't really happening?
So as I got older, yes. And there was actually one point where I did try to go to the police and say, hey, this is something that happened to me. I mean, it was several years later. I wasn't taken serious, but I think that a lot of that had to do with what my criminal history was with that specific department. And in that specific town, because I was a menace and I definitely committed a lot of crimes as I got older.
Damn. Yeah, and that's kind of a shame. Is like, as a police officer, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be a police officer. But if I'm a police officer or somebody in a community, and I'm constantly dealing with a group of kids, and then one of them actually comes to me with a legitimate problem, how do you go about taking this person seriously? And that's a shame. because I had a friend of mine that was shot and killed by police who had been a drug addict and a kind of a menace to, that community. And, I don't think he was, I don't think he was a bad guy. Definitely didn't deserve to be shot and killed like that. But I'm sure that the police that were there that day were like, it's this fucking guy again. How do you balance that out? You know what I mean? Like
So my husband, he's a roofer, and it was funny because he just called me the other day, and he had to go do an inspection on somebody's roof.
Mhm.
Well, my name's what comes up on the caller ID, and not a lot of people have my name. So it turns out it was an officer's house in a specific area, and mind you, I haven't been in that area in over 12 years. But the majority of people who know me and in that area know that I'm doing well and I've changed my life. I guess he did not know so much that, and so when my husband got there, he asked him if he was married to me. I was like, just really negative about the whole experience. And I'm like, oh, you should just ask him, are you going to get the roof or not? Because if it's based
Right.
off who he knows, who I used to be, that really sucks.
Yeah. So you mentioned about 11 years old was when you started to kind of party. And I guess it just kind of spiraled from then on. How long do you think it was? How old were you whenever you started doing like the harder stuff?
So I was in high school when I started doing like cocaine and I started doing meth. I was
And meth was different then than it is now.
now, yeah.
Yeah.
I would be afraid to do the stuff now.
Yeah.
Um,
So I guess you probably were in high school like 15, 16, you think?
I was 17.
So that was probably
I was like it was like 2002.
yeah, when they were still like manufacturing it in houses and labs and shit.
Yeah. And then it was probably 2005 when I started using heroin.
Was that because they cracked down on meth so hard that
No, I really didn't like meth. And that's when I knew I was an addict because I kept using drugs I did not like.
Right.
But I had to stay using drugs. I'm the oddball in my family, and I think that's why maybe I don't struggle with the mental health as much because I was more of a heroin addict where everybody else was more into meth.
Mm.
And I really liked pain pills. I really liked the oxys when that was a huge thing. Yeah, and then they just kind of vanished. And I was always that person who was never going to use the needle. I was never going to do heroin. I was never going to be that bad. And then the night my kids got taken from me was the very first night I ever did heroin. And it was like all my pain just left my body. I didn't have to worry about anything.
Had you snorted or done any heroin like that before?
Yeah, that's how I started was through snorting. It took a while before I got to the place of breaking down and using the needle.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked to JK a little bit about that too. I was like, that's really mind blowing to me. It's just because I've done drugs, obviously. I just, didn't get too hard into it. Experimented with certain things, but I never did like meth or heroin. And I think the biggest thing for me was when I started to see a lot of my friends go down that road was I came to a house where all my friends were and I thought we were going to go out and party and they all had been using needles and I didn't know yet and I was I'm thinking we're going to have a good night and they're all just like drooling on themselves and they're fucked up and I'm like what the hell's going on? I was like what are you guys doing? I thought we were going out. And then I'm like oh my god, like all right, this is you guys are into something different, and it was just really weird because it's like those are like all my friends. What? And I found out that I didn't really have to separate myself from them; they separated themselves from me.
Yeah, we do a really good job of that, but then we blame everybody else for leaving us. I know my escalation, a lot of it involved my kid's dad. I was in a really abusive relationship with him.
So you met him in early high school years and then stayed together all the way until you were using needles, or had you met somebody else at that point?
No, we were together roughly about 10 years.
Okay.
3 kids, few incarcerations, DFS a couple times. Like we went through a lot of stuff together, a lot of homelessness.
How's he doing now? Is he still struggling, or is he?
So he recently got in recovery. He just celebrated 2 years. He had reached out and I was able to help him navigate what he needed to do so that he could get to a better place. But he hasn't, it wasn't up until the last 2 years that he's actually been able to do anything different. So,
Wow. How long have you been sober now?
12 years.
12 years. Okay, so that's a damn long time. So 2014.
2012 was actually October 30th, 2012 was the last day I used.
Wow,
And that was the day I turned myself in.
that's been that long. 2012 does not feel like it was 12 years ago. But no, congratulations. That's awesome. A lot. I mean, with the drugs and stuff that are out there now, are you glad that you missed the whole fentanyl era?
I didn't actually miss that. I was still using when it first started coming around.
Oh, really?
Like when people were first starting to die and they were talking about changing the law, like that was what we were chasing. Because it was like you never thought you would be the person that would die from it, but you always wanted to chase that next high. You wanted to get that first experience all over again. So we were always chasing what might be more intense, what might put us on the line of taking that risk.
Right. That's crazy. No, I've heard that several times. If somebody would die from a certain type of heroin or pills, people would actually go and want to try to get that.
Yeah.
So that's that speaks pretty much volumes to like the insanity of drug addiction. It's like you're trying to find something that could kill you.
And really, when there was a time in my life for like 6 months that I was trying to kill myself and I was using fentanyl and heroin pretty heavy, at that time they were still kind of like cut together. It wasn't strictly fentanyl yet. I guess it went strictly fentanyl probably about 6 years ago. But I was getting up every day and I was going and I was getting what I could and just hoping to God I wouldn't wake up the next day or, after I closed my eyes from doing that.
So when you're using fentanyl, are you able to do anything other than fentanyl? Like, are you able to go to work? Are you able to like do much, or are you just so fucked up that you can't really do anything?
Well, I guess it depends.
Right.
Like, especially at first, when you first start doing it, you probably really can't do a lot of things, but you learn how to live on it. Like, I learned how to function. I could only function if I had the drugs in my body. Like, if I didn't, I was sick in bed all day. I couldn't mom. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't do any of that. So you get to a place where your tolerance is just that. It's a tolerance. And you're using just to be able to function throughout the day.
How different? So you mentioned, are you able to inject fentanyl?
Yes.
Really? Yeah. And it doesn't kill you? I guess you can do
no, it can.
Right.
But again, it depends on the level of risk and it depends on your tolerance and how often you're stopping use and then starting use again. There were several times that I had overdosed, and if it wasn't for Narcan, I wouldn't be here today.
Oh, you've been Narcan a couple of times?
Yeah.
Wow. What's that? Do you remember what it's like, or are you pretty much out of it when that happens and you just kind of wake up in the hospital?
So, I mean, you wake up when you're being Narcaned, and for some it's like projectile, like poltergeist vomiting, a lot of anger. Like, I was so mad every time and probably a little combative.
Because you're like, you just fucked up my high.
Well, that, you wake up and you're not high, but also you wake up with just like all of this going on around you and you just feel so powerless and confused because you have no idea. This is not what was happening when I last was present. And then you wake up and there's all these people around you and then that fear of, are the cops going to come arrest? Like, just so much.
Shit, now I'm going to fucking jail.
Yeah.
How many times have you been to jail?
I think it would be an easier question to ask how many times I hadn't been to jail during a 10-year period. I grew up in Franklin County Jail.
Yeah.
They raised me. When I got out and I got into recovery and I got in the drug court program, the only people I felt safe having communication with was the jailers. Like, when I was struggling or I was trying not to use or I was just trying to make the right decision, I would actually call the jail and talk to one of them to get me through that thought process.
Damn.
So, yeah. So from 18 to 28, I spent more time in Franklin County Jail. I spent about 10 months in prison and then a few times in inpatient over that time period than I did on the streets.
Damn. So how old were you when you first got arrested, and what was that for?
I was 17 when I first got arrested in high school, and for distribution. At the time, we were selling weed and other drugs, but they had only found out they could only find the marijuana. But yeah.
Okay. So, when you got sentenced, you mentioned that you went to prison,
Mhm.
like 10 months, I guess.
Yeah.
What was that for? What was your final?
I can't really remember. I did a lot of absconding,
What's that?
running from probation and parole, not checking
Oh,
in. I continued to get like possession charges, or I had committed some fraud and some other things over that period of time. So I can't really pinpoint or remember because there's a good chunk of my life I can't remember. And
just
during those years from just being so high all the time.
right.
And it's actually kind of devastating because I'll meet people and they'll say, "Hey, I know you," and they'll remember all these details about me, my kids, but I can't place them for the life of me. And these are people I brought around my kids, so it's like
Right.
really still coming to surface how much I put myself and my kids at risk over that time.
Yeah.
I just remember getting picked up and going to prison. I actually work with the PO now that sent me to prison back then.
Oh wow.
So it's come around full circle.
What prison did you go to?
Vandalia.
Where's in Vandalia, Missouri?
Mm-hmm.
Where's that at? Is it strictly a women's prison?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's up past like Columbia and stuff.
Ah,
I
okay.
don't really know. Personally,
What
just
was
been there a few times to pick
what
people
was
up and stuff.
and you'd never been to? That's the only time you went.
Yeah, I wasn't going back.
Right. So, how scary was that? Was it pretty easy, or was it
I
like
could
holy
do
fuck?
time. I mean, it was a culture shock for me, but I could do time. I got employed while I was in there. I worked in the mechanic shop and the maintenance shop, and we had a schedule. It was the only time in my life I ever knew any real structure or discipline.
Right.
I knew how to do time. I didn't know how to live on the streets.
I've met people like that. And it's like, sheesh, you
Mm.
know. I don't know how to. Like one of my friends is like that, and it's like, man, I wish I could help you, but like we're just so. It's like I like you and I care about you, but it's like I don't know how to help you. Um, but I interviewed him. He's a really interesting guy, but he like his whole life was just so chaotic, and mom and dad were on drugs. It was just such a violent and wild upbringing. And when I look at like how long he's lived that way, I start to wonder, like, I don't know if he'll ever not be able to, like almost like prison would probably just be the best place for him to stay. As bad as that sounds.
Well, I mean, I was that person too, but now I have a job helping people navigate,
Right.
how to find recovery and how to build their lives and learn how to be different people, be the people we were meant to be, not the people that our environment produced us to
Right.
be.
Yeah, that's his thing. It's environment. And a lot of people, like a lot of my friends have used drugs and stuff and been horrible, horrible addicts, on the needle, the whole nine. And they're just now starting to, get it right. Like I'm 33, and several of my friends from high school, like I mean, it was from the minute we graduated until just 2 or 3 years ago, they were the on the needle. So it's like, you know, we're doing our 15-year class reunion, but it's like for them, they're really only like 1 or 2 years out because it's like they're just now starting real life.
Yeah. So it's really mind blowing how we have a huge recovery community in Franklin County between AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, Overcomers. We have such a huge network. Like, I don't go anywhere and not see at least 7 people, no matter where I go, that are in recovery that I've known or have been in recovery and maybe fallen back off the wagon and working their way back. But the amount of people that have made an attempt at changing their life in this community is huge.
All right. So, like what you're saying, there's a big recovery community in Franklin County. And at one time, probably in your era, we were the meth capital of the world. So you were
Yes.
like in all of that.
Yes.
I wanted to interview. There's a guy from the town that I'm originally from. I'm from Sullivan. So there's a guy that I want to interview. They were like they got busted in like the early 2000s, and like from my understanding, they're the reason that Franklin County was what it was. Do you know any of those people?
I don't know, because I know a lot of people, and a lot of them take credit for that. So there's a lot of them that do. And I know there was a lot of movement. And I mean, I was a person, like, I would date guys who cooked meth because I didn't have to share heroin with them. And so I would be in the mix of all of that, like doing
When
my
was
own
the
thing.
first time you ever tried meth? Like, what was that situation like?
I was really mad at my kid's dad because he was already using and he was like never around, and I wanted to know why. I wanted to understand that process. And that's how I was already hooked on Coke. I loved Coke, but meth just sounded gross. Right.
Right.
So I was like, no, that's not going to be my thing. And he was never around, and I wanted to understand the process. Mind you, I was in this abusive relationship, and it was like very toxic, but I was so codependent. I was more addicted to being codependent, I think, than I was drugs. But so I started using meth to try to understand, and that was kind of my story with the progression of any of the other drugs. Was I wanted to be able to be connected to him, and that was the only way we could find connection. So, and it wasn't until many years later that I was using meth with the needle, which I absolutely hated too, by the way, like worst experience of my life. But um, I tried it with his sister for the first time. I'm like, let's do this. What is this about?
So, did you inject it the first time? I was gonna
No,
say.
I smoked.
Smoke.
Yeah. And I was addicted to it, but I did not like it.
Right. How old do you think you were?
17.
17. Were you
Yeah.
still in school?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Sheesh.
Actually, so prom night.
Did you ever see did you ever go in and like actually see like a lab, like people making the shit?
So I've definitely been a part of those. And it was rough and sketchy and scary,
Mm-hmm.
because you never
Back
never
then,
know.
you could all get blown up
Mhm.
and like really die.
So when when people smoke meth and they do meth, they get really, really paranoid a lot of the time, especially if they've been up for days.
Right.
There were times where I wasn't doing that because, like I said, I was so far into the heroin, but they would like talk their paranoia into me that I would also be watching out windows and stuff and like
Right.
convinced. It was a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who used back then and talking about being up for like weeks on end. Like no sleep for weeks is just so insane. And like how bad that is, like how disoriented people get. So I'm sure you don't miss that.
No.
So you end up in prison and you did 10 months. And what was is that kind of like, was that like the final straw for you? Like, hey, I'm gonna start getting sober now.
Every time I got incarcerated, that was the final straw. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
every time, and I genuinely, my soul meant that I was going to get out and I was going to do better. I was going to get my kids back. And every time I would get out and I would do better and I would start seeing my kids again and get a job and work on getting a place and all of that for a few weeks. But then I would date another guy who just didn't do the drugs I liked or didn't, until I fell back into that cycle. And then in a matter of weeks, I would lose it all over again. And
Right.
then I'd be incarcerated again. And so after I got out of prison, I was doing well for a little bit longer than I normally would. But then my whole family, that's all I do is use. And I had nobody else, nothing else. And I just remember my PO, she was like, if you don't go to treatment, you're going back to prison.
Right.
And so I went to treatment, and then I got out. And when I got out, the boyfriend was seeing at the time, him and my best friend wound up hooking up, and they wound up costing me my place to live because I started selling drugs out of the place, things like that. And so I had nowhere to go, and I was back to being homeless again. And so it wasn't very long before I was back to using again. And
So explain the homelessness. Like you're not actually like on a street corner. You just kind of like staying at a place like wherever people will have you, like kind of
I
drug house
stayed
to
in
drug
abandoned
house.
places. I slept under bridges. I've been homeless
Jesus.
for weeks and months on end. I've bounced around from couches, and I've been through the ringer.
So, how scary is that? Is it just like did it become normal or were you like,
Yeah, it became very normal. It was like as long as I was getting high, nothing else mattered.
oh, wow.
But at the end of the day, when you start to like sit in your stuff and be alone,
When you're homeless though, how did you afford to do drugs? Did you just like know people? I guess a lot of it was you had a boyfriend that was
I lost all morals and values and self-respect. I was completely broken. I definitely did things. I definitely used my body to get things that
so
I
at
wanted.
in the lowest at the low points
Yeah,
when you're
and I stole a lot, and I have burglary charges. Whatever it took, I was willing to do whatever it took to stay high.
yeah. So it's that bad where you're like, I'll use my body to get what I need and then no you don't have any money for like that's how chaotic your life
Yeah,
was.
and as long as I could get high, I wasn't worried about eating or anything else.
What's the worst thing that ever happened to you while you were like out on the street? What was your worst experience in all of the
I mean, that physically happened to me, and not like my
Yeah.
kids being taken from me, because my kids being taken was probably the worst thing that ever happened to me. But there was a point in my life where I had been raped, and that wasn't by my choice. You know what I mean? So there's a whole different piece of you that just kind of gets taken when everything else is already gone too from that.
Was it like drug related or did somebody just kind of like come out of nowhere that you didn't know or did you know this person?
No, I knew the person, and I was definitely, well, I didn't know them, but I knew of them, and we were hanging like at the same spots, and I was definitely really under the influence.
Yeah. I'm sorry that happened to you.
Thanks.
That's a tough one. Yeah, I couldn't I can imagine that being an addict like when you're at that level for a guy it's got to be tough, but I feel like it would just be so much more sketch as a woman because of that alone.
Yeah, and you have to pretend to be tough all the time. All the time. So I was also a very angry, violent person too.
Did you get in a lot of fights?
I did. I did. I would pick a lot of fights with just random people because I needed to release.
Right. So, so when you were in prison, did you fight in prison at all? No.
No.
Was the prison that you were in, was it like for girls only that were like struggling with drugs or was it like anything goes?
Everybody. And
Okay.
everything. And I mean,
Was it only women?
yeah. And there was definitely some moments like that were really sketch, like COs hooking up with inmates, inmates sneaking onto the wrong wings and, having to go out for the fire drill at like 3 a.m. because they're trying to sneak back to their proper wing because they were overseeing their girlfriend.
How do you do that?
You just go into the wrong door and then you set off the alarm so that you can get back over without getting caught. There's a lot of drugs in prison. I managed to stay sober when I was in prison. The only time I could get sobriety time was if I was pregnant. So I say if I was locked up or knocked up.
Right.
Were the only times I could get any kind of sobriety time, and eventually being knocked up wasn't enough either. I would use during my pregnancies too.
Damn. Do any of your children like have any hard feelings against you or any of that, or are they just kind of like
So I got them back when I graduated treatment court in 2015.
how
But-
old were they?
My oldest was 12. My youngest was 6, 7. Um,
And you've seen
and
them every day since.
yeah, I never lost them again. I learned how to be a mom. I learned how to pay bills. I learned how to keep them fed. I learned how to love them when I didn't know how to be loved.
So in
And
2014, 15 era was kind of when things really started to come together for you
yeah,
in a positive way.
well, I got into drug court in 2013, and I really learned how to take care of myself and love myself because I had lost my kids before.
Right.
Did the things I had to do to get them back, but I did that for them. I had to do it for me this time so that I would not
Go
put
back.
them, and I spent 2 years instead of rushing to get them back, 2 years really focusing on learning how to be a human because I didn't want to destroy their lives again. I didn't want to break them again. And so I've had them, and I've loved them. And my husband, actually, he was in treatment court with me, and we knew each other. We used to hate each
Your
other.
husband that you have now?
Yeah, we used to hate each other. We have using history together. Then we got in recovery, and amazingly enough, you're a whole different person when you remove the substances.
Right.
Like some people are still just shitty people in
Mhm.
general, but for the most part, we become decent humans, and our intentions mean well, even if we don't know how to be well. They mean well,
Right.
And so he and I wound up getting together and getting married, and he's got 4 kids. I have, and our kids like were all born around the same time, like
Mhm.
year, and we were all from the same trailer park
Mm-hmm.
when we were having kids. So it was just really ironic how that all happened. But we learned how to be parents to these kids, and we got a couple of our kids struggle with some things, which statistically, them coming from addicted parents is
Right.
likely. But I think we've gotten a lot luckier than I thought we would have, considering we only struggle with like 2.5 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of them are all doing pretty well.
That's awesome. So, been through a lot, to say the least.
Yeah.
So up until drug court, did you ever have anyone in your life that was a positive influence on you at all, or
Crazy enough, I didn't realize it then, but I would have to say a couple of the police officers I had regular dealings with was about it. Because they would always say things to me.
like try to?
Yeah, like, what are you doing? You're better than this. And I'm always like, you don't fucking know me. Like, you don't know where I came
Right.
from. And there was one in particular who I would, after I had gotten into treatment court, when I reached that 30-day mark, that 60-day mark, that 90-day mark, like I would leave a voicemail just thanking him because he never had given up believing in me. And I was truly grateful for that. And there was one other person who would always be like, you're better than this. And,
Right.
but it was a male. So I assumed that his intentions were not good. But now looking back, I think I was wrong.
So you spent, almost 20 years on drugs.
No, I spent?
More than that?
Yeah. No,
From
almost 20.
About 20 years. And that was
17?
what I when I interviewed JK, he started around 10 or 11, and he's 32 now, or 30. No, he's like 34. And I'm like, damn, it's like 20 years of being
Life just gone.
Yeah. But you see a lot of crazy stuff in that time. Like you're exposed to so much stuff. Like, what do you think? Was there anything that you've seen that you were just like, okay, that's fucked up? Like, what's the craziest thing that you ever witnessed? Not something that happened to you, but something that maybe happened to somebody else that's like, what's
I don't really, I mean, like I said, I've been in meth labs. I did a lot of selling drugs myself, a lot of fights. There's a few times where, there was one time that we were all put at risk, and like I literally had a dude holding a gun to my head, and I was just like not having it. You know what I mean? Like, you're not robbing me. Here's the deal. I don't know how we made it out of there alive, but we did.
what happened? Like, how did that whole thing transpire?
2 cars of us had gone down to St. Louis to buy some drugs, and we did everything legit, but the other party used fake cash.
Ooh.
And so we were still in the area, and it came back on us. And I don't remember how it all worked out because it was pretty messy. But I don't think anything really ever. I think it was expected. I don't think anything ever was like, oh wow, I cannot believe that just happened because it was just so normal.
Right.
So, and everybody that we associated with was doing the same stuff, and that was a comfortable place for us. It
Right.
was what we knew. So, I don't think things started getting uncomfortable for me until I got into recovery,
Right.
and then everything just kind of like, boop, now it's time to actually learn how to live life.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. You got into, I guess, so the drug court
Mhm.
here in Franklin County is kind of like the thing that really helped you the most
Yeah.
and got you sober, kept you sober. And now you're involved with that, I guess.
Yeah. So I graduated drug court in 2015. I was working at Buddy's during that time, and I worked at Buddy's for a few years after that. But I was really implanted in my recovery community,
Mm-hmm.
sponsoring girls. I have a sponsor. Like I'm still very much invested because as much as I didn't want to believe these people going into these meetings that this was something I needed to help me stay sober and what's going to keep me going, eventually it became a belief system of mine because it was working. For the first time in my life, I was finding something that brought me joy and kept me sober. So, fast forward like 6 years later, no, I guess I had been in Buddy's almost 9 years.
What's Buddies?
It's a plastic factory in Union.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I had been there almost 9 years, and the treatment team had reached out to me and asked me if I'd be willing to do peer support.
Mm.
I didn't believe in myself enough, but everybody else apparently did. So I'm like, well, okay, why not? And I got the role as a peer support specialist through Prevent Ed. And through going through treatment court, I was able to recognize maybe some of the places where, because a lot of people do fall off after graduation because their intentions aren't necessarily to change their life. We can hope that that's going to be a change in their mindset later.
Right.
But a lot of times it's just to not go to prison or just not, have to deal with the other consequences.
Right.
And I've experienced a lot of loss from people over the years that I've loved, that I got to know that have gone through these programs, that have overdosed and died after, whatever life happening and them going
Mhm.
back to it. So, as a peer support, I've been able to come back and work with treatment court to help people work on all those things in the beginning, all those barriers that maybe the treatment can't help with or the probation can't help with. Like, we will go sit with them in their first meeting. We will help make sure they get to doctor's appointments. We will get their birth certificate, their ID, all these things that I knew were vital for me to succeed and were overwhelming because I didn't know where to start, because nobody ever taught me this stuff. So
Right.
I get to help people navigate that. And now I sit at the table, with the lady who was my probation officer when I was in treatment court, and the other lady who has sent me to prison. At one point, one of the officers who probably arrested me 100 times was like a part of this team. And I get to be a different person to them.
Right.
So it's pretty cool. And I get to help a lot of people.
So you do think there's a legitimate, I think the general public seems to think that there's not much, no one gives a shit about people that are using. Like there's nobody's trying to help them, and that basically that it's just, the government's fault. And, would you say there's actually a very concerted effort by the community?
So I
to
think
get people
stigma
sober?
plays a big part in that. I think it's still taking a lot for people to recognize that addiction is a brain disease and not just a moral failing, and the reason I know it's a brain disease is because I've been in recovery over 12 years and I still think about using. I still get triggers, I still have cravings, but I don't want to use. I don't want to destroy my life. I know I'll break out in handcuffs if I don't die first real quick. Um and I know Prevent Ed, the company I work for, I know we're trying to get into all the doors we possibly can to say, hey, here's this program. Instead of giving up on people, give them our number. Let us help them, because we're a free service to the community.
Is it a private company or is it a government sponsored?
I mean, we're a non-for-profit and we work under federal grant money to make this happen. So if there's no grant funding, then there's no jobs. But,
Right.
the amount of change and help we have done in this community, and we've gotten into other communities too, based off just the work that we've done here in Franklin County, because our peer support program first started here.
Mm.
Me, my coworker Ryan Donnelly, or Ryan Daughtry, and Monica have like really worked hard to build up our program and let people know we're here, no judgment, whatever you need. Like if they're homeless, we go to them. We will sit with them and we'll work on whatever we got to. We make sure they can get connected to food and water and showers. And,
Right.
we've driven people to Springfield just to get them to court so they wouldn't wind up with a warrant because we knew what that
Right.
would cause. And it's not fair if they don't have the transportation for them to get hurt more in that process.
So you guys just kind of like work with the drug courts,
Yeah.
and
We work with everybody.
so how do you find people exactly? Did people get sent to you? Like,
Some people do get referred to us. So we also, though, a lot of times we find people, right? I remember this guy.
like I've been to the office there where where they used to do like the SATOP.
They still do that there.
Okay.
Yeah, we're in the building with the Freedom Recovery Center.
Okay.
We rent space. We actually were in Krakow and we moved closer. That way we're closer to the courthouse or within walking distance.
Mm-hmm.
So people could just walk in. A lot of it's word of mouth. I know I have people call me from the jail all the time, and I help them get connected with different services before they get out. And that's just because everybody in there has access to my phone number because someone says, hey, call this person, they'll help you. And then it gets passed on. And eventually I started having people from DOCs calling me and other county jails. And I'm like, how did you get my number? Like, that's my question. And it's, well, my friend said you helped them.
Yeah.
So
That's how I heard of you.
yeah. So it's, a lot of it is word of mouth. And then we go into these different places and we just inform them what we do, what we offer, and how we can help, and there's people we will see. I've found people sitting out front of the gas station holding signs, and I'm like, hey, come here. Let's see what we can do, and those things have worked.
Wow. See, I didn't know that it was like that. I thought that like I thought that you guys were part of like the drug court or SATOP or something, and like they had to go to you.
Now we work and partner with, and as far as like treatment court, eventually the treatment court process at the end, they're required to come to us so we can work on what does recovery look like for them after. How do we help them have some purpose and be better set up for success? Because the reality of it is, once somebody graduates drug court, it's like we look forward to that, right? We're so excited. We're finally at the end of it. But then once it happens, you don't know what to do with yourself.
How long is drug court?
It's an 18-month minimum program, but it could be as long as it takes some people.
Yeah. I almost went to drug court over drinking and driving.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was I've been to jail a bunch of times for drinking. I never stole anything, never committed violent crimes or anything like that. It was just go out, get super fucking drunk, and then wake up in jail, and it's like, oh damn, again.
Yeah, but you put a lot of people's lives at risk in that car.
Yeah, for sure, especially my own. And I thought that I was gonna have to go to drug court, but I ended up not. But in 2015, that was like, the final straw, because both of my kids were starting to get past the baby phase.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, I can't be going to prison and stuff, and I just didn't want them to have that life. And it took a long time to kind of like bounce back. I still deal with the ramifications of that, like driver's license issues, and like luckily I'm self-employed, because I would not be able to get the job that I want.
Yeah, luckily my job requires you almost to be a felon.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you have to be a person with lived experience to have the job I have. So
Like,
otherwise my
to,
criminal history would keep me out of a lot of
Yeah.
doors.
I went to like in that same building where you guys are set up. I had to do like the 100-hour SATOP program there. Like
Yeah.
I was there like 3 nights a week, fucking writing my name in a little crayon book basically, and you're getting talked to, how to stay sober. It's very demoralizing, because at my age, I'm like, I should know better.
Yeah, well, we all have flaws.
Right.
And I think, I think that has changed too, because I've come back and I do those groups.
Mm-hmm.
I facilitate SATOP and stuff. And so do some of the others. It's all new staff there pretty much. And
Right.
we get to just be human, right? Because
Yeah.
we've been those people in those seats. We're not people who just went to school to learn how to do this or was educated through some program. Like, we were educated through life.
Mm.
And so we know how to be human with them while they're going through this and have those real conversations. And I think that has been a game changer in how people perceive those classes when they have to go through them.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting people in those classes, because like, I'm there for partying,
Mhm.
and like you can't really, it's not me and a bunch of other partiers. It's me and then everybody else that's like really struggling with, like, not just their addiction. Like, drugs isn't just their only problem. It's their whole fucking life.
Yeah.
All the things that they've been through. And I'm just a fuck off that just likes to go to the bar. And I think that's a big reason why I wanted to get in to start doing this, is because I've spent so much time around them. And it just like, just seeing people and going through those programs, and like, you come in, you sit down, and then here comes somebody that's like super fucked up on drugs, and it's like, oh, damn. And you like them, but they're struggling with something way worse than drinking beer. And I've seen it. I had to deal. I was in that class for like months. So once I finished the 100-hour SATOP, I had to go to another year-long program where I was the only drunk, and everybody else was like really dealing with serious problems. And I'm sitting in there like, just seeing this. And plus, at the same time, a lot of my friends were like, using hardcore, on the needle. And I'm just like, man, it was just real eye opening. And I'm like, I wish there was a way that I could somehow help. Not that I know how to help these people, but
A lot of people also, where alcohol is their drug of choice, lives in that same chaos.
yeah.
Continues to get incarcerated, or it creates chaos in your world. So you do have a lot of the similar problems. It's usually looking for the similarities and not the differences is what helps keep us humble. And I didn't realize the statistics and stuff, because I always looked at drugs as way worse too. But then learning the amount of people who have criminal charges, or the amount of deaths that have happened regardless of health issues from alcohol or sudden death, like, it's scary out there, and I worry for my kids.
Yeah.
I do.
No, yeah, it's just crazy. Crazy, crazy. So you get to be a helper though now, and help people get sober, straighten their lives out. I obviously I'm friends with Tommy and JK, and I was talking to them, and they kept bringing your name up, and I was like, I gotta see what's going on here. Talk to Ken and Joe. So thank you very much for coming on once again. You've obviously experienced just about all of it.
Yeah.
How do you what do I want to say here? How do you keep people coming back, and like, what's one of the biggest problems that you guys have with the people that are in like the treatment and stuff?
So the one thing I think we keep people coming back. Well, one, if someone tries to take off on me, if I'm in your life, I'm in your life, right?
Right.
And I'm going to do everything I can to help you believe that I believe in you. So there's a lot of times where we will go and we will knock on doors,
Mhm.
and we will find these people, and we will bring them back, and we'll get them plugged into recovery. It's just helping them believe in themselves, or just know that somebody believes in them enough until they believe in themselves. We do have a lot of reoccurring issues, and just not giving up on them just because somebody uses and continues to use doesn't mean they don't want something different. So just letting them know, like, we're here and we're going to love you through this no matter what, and keep finding whatever options, because not everything works the same for everybody. So maybe we got to try something different, and figuring out what that looks like for those people helps keep them coming back. But more importantly, I think building trust. Like, they know my story,
Mm-hmm.
and I've asked that too, because we've had some people who have come back after, like, they did well for 2 years, and they had a relapse, and then they're like coming back and like, I need help getting treatment, and I'm like, well, why are you coming here? And that's their answer: I can trust you. We build that rapport, we build that trust with people.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. And I knew that there was, had to be something to it because, like, when I interviewed JK, 20 years, he'd been using, and that was like pretty much all he ever knew, was that environment and that lifestyle, and 20 years of drug addiction, and like that was what your guys' program seemed to be like the deciding factor that really made a difference for him.
Yeah, I was
So,
not giving up on him. He tried.
yeah.
It wasn't happening. And I think when we finally really started addressing his mental health, the thing, because me being aware of what mental health looks like, I was able to call him out on that, because he
Mhm.
was never really forthcoming. He tried to just be tough and okay all the time. And pulling that out of him and then helping him find the services he needed or the things he needed to work on for him to be better was a huge factor in that.
How many people do you think you guys work with at a given time?
Well, I know, like, for medication assisted treatment, that's like your Suboxone, your Vivitrol, your Sublocade. We have funding that helps cover the cost for people to get that medication and see doctors. So we have built up a program around that. We have about 200 people we're working with in Franklin County. And
So you're working with 200 people at a time.
yeah, the three of us. And it ebbs and
And it,
flows. Some of them will fall off for a couple months and then come back. Some of them we work with every day of the week for weeks until they feel like they're okay. Some we work with for 6 months. Some I still work with 4 years later now since I've started the job. So it just really depends on the person and what they need.
so, a question of mine is, why do they elect to go with like Suboxone and stuff like that? Like, do you agree with that? Because
I do. So I was a Vivitrol. When I was on the Vivitrol, it was a game changer for me. There was like this sense of freedom in my brain. Like, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't obsessing. I wasn't craving. I was okay. And I had
Mhm.
never had that sense of freedom. And with fentanyl, it is so hard to get anybody started on the Vivitrol because everything has to be out of their system. And fentanyl stays in the system a lot longer than normal drugs do if they use a lot.
Yeah.
So the idea is, I've been through withdrawal.
Mm-hmm.
The very first time was 21 days. By day 22, I was using again because I couldn't do it no more. I had
Right.
lost a lot of weight. I was so sick. So I know that people are not going to go through that process.
So withdrawal can last that long?
Oh yeah,
20
it
days
can.
from fentanyl?
It can. It
Jesus.
it has a long-term effect, and you still have minimal effects over the years. Like, it took me several years to be able to sleep right, eat right.
Right.
But so bridging that gap, I'm a huge fan of the Sublocade. I'm a huge fan of the Vivitrol. The Suboxone is needed to kind of bridge that gap. And the goal is
So they put you
eventually-
on all three?
No,
Okay.
you have your choices. But in order to get on the Sublocade, you do have to start on Suboxone. Most people can't get to the Vivitrol because we need to start them on the Suboxone, and you can't have Suboxone in your system to start Vivitrol. So, like, if people are incarcerated, we've gotten some of the courts to work with us sometimes if we're working with someone to give someone a furlough so we could go get them on the Vivitrol and then take them back. That way, when they're getting released, they're already have that medication. We have the next appointment set up. Maybe we got sober living set up or something like that.
Right.
But they're less likely to overdose and die after, because the more times you stop and then start, the more likely you are to overdose and die.
So I guess these drugs all mimic the effect to some degree.
Yeah, you have. The Vivitrol is a full blocking effect. Your body does not become dependent on that whatsoever. It completely blocks those receptors. Your Sublocade and your Suboxone are a partial blocking effect. So it's still kind of releases some of the dopamines necessary, but
Mhm.
at a regulated amount. The Sublocade's an injection you get once a month, and it like tapers out of your system over time. So
Oh,
the
okay.
idea of withdrawal is very minimal coming off the Sublocade, and it's a game changer. It's different than if somebody was taking Suboxone orally. They're the same medication ultimately, but different effects.
Right.
I don't like the Suboxone solely based off the struggle I know people are going to experience when they start to withdraw. That's why I'm a
Mhm.
big push for the Sublocade because they're not going to have that. And people can stop taking the Suboxone whenever they want to use. Like it might take a few days to be able to use, but where if they're on this Sublocade or they're on the Vivitrol, then they have at least 30 to 45 days to be able to change their mind till the next dose before they want to use again. So it gives us more of a foundation for them to build upon. I know a lot of people are against the medications,
Mhm.
but also a lot of people have never been where other people have been, you know?
Right.
And my thought process is if we're going to keep someone alive long enough to get a recovery brain, then it's whatever it takes, you know?
Do you think? Have you ever heard of kratom?
Yeah.
You don't think
No.
that's useful to
No.
anybody?
We have people that we have to help go through detox off kratom too. It is toxic. It's addictive. It destroys lives. People lose weight, can't eat, can't sleep. Their moods change.
What's wrong with it? How, compared to like some of the other medications, or do you?
Well, one, kratom's not a medication.
Right.
It's something you
It's
get
just.
from the vape store.
Mhm.
It's not regulated. And it has it. But people get high off of it for like
Right.
and can use. I mean, people can abuse their medication too, not the injections, but they could abuse the orals. Um, but usually when people are using kratom, it's really not for the right motives.
Right. So I had no fucking clue what that shit was. And one of my friends, it was on the needle.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this one friend that I'm like super close with that was like just probably the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I like some of my other friends were probably equally as bad, but I just didn't spend a lot of time with them like through their addiction. Like this guy, I watched. I know what addiction is because of him.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know anything about it. But he showed up at my house one day and he's got like his little bag of these little green pills. And I'm like, how you been? And I would hang out with him all the time. And I knew he was on dope. Like I'd seen him with needles in his arms. He'd come out in blood and shit. And I've seen this guy so messed up before. And I always, I just wanted to show him that like somebody cares about you. I don't know how to help you, but I'm here for you if you ever want to sober up. But he'd come by one day and he had the kratom, and I'm like, "What is that?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm trying this because I'm trying to get sober." I was like, well, "What is it?"
And it will help with withdrawals.
Yeah, and I think that that was the only time that I ever seen it like, because I've seen him when he's like manic trying to get high, where he's like, "Hey, we gotta go here, we gotta go here, we gotta go here," and I'm like, "Yo, chill, what's going on?" And I seen when he was using that, he would just take some of those, and then we could hang out for several hours, and he wouldn't run off to the bathroom, or he wouldn't be on his phone trying to call some random place, and then he could chill. And I was like, okay, there's something to that.
Mm-hmm.
But then like I know that they've got their own like Subutex and Suboxone and some of the other ones that you were just talking about. But yes, kratom is
there's
definitely
different
not a
types of
cure
kratom
all.
too.
Yeah.
No, and I know, and I've suggested to people, it's not suggested, right? But
Right.
I have suggested people who can't get into a detox bed that are like going through it and they're just miserable. If this is what you have to do to prevent you from going back to using,
Mm-hmm.
then do it just to get through that hump. And
Yeah.
as long as we're just, I get it. If
I've
we're
seen
just
people
going through
abuse it
that
too.
process.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a person who used meth to get through my withdrawals.
Right.
I would much rather see someone use kratom than meth.
Right.
So if they're able to do that, I get it. But for the people who continue to use it for long term,
Mm-hmm.
you're just really staying stuck in addiction.
Right. Yeah, because it's I've seen people use like little small amounts of it, but then I've also heard of people drink like a fucking kilo of it in a week.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that can't even be good for your body. Like that's this much green powder
Yeah.
circulating through your stomach in a week.
Well, it's like, and the marijuana, that stuff is so potent and toxic now. Like,
Yeah.
I went through with my kid recently. Like, she was vomiting every single day while smoking it and through the withdrawal. The withdrawal process was the worst. I don't think I ever want to be a teenage mom again, ever. So I will probably never sign up to watch somebody's kids ever.
Right.
But she was miserable and she was broken. Her mental health was off the chain. And she just like, through smoking marijuana, she forgot how to live life. She wasn't present.
Yeah.
And she had a few
It's-
weeks without.
it's
and
way
a
too
whole
strong.
different person, you know?
Well, and then there's, weed that, if you're not buying it from like a dispensary that's accredited and legit, somebody might be mixing up some fentanyl here and then they
but-
touch the weed or, like,
Also, the stuff coming through those dispensaries are being made in garages.
right.
You know what I mean? Very seldom is any
Yeah, you
of
never
it
know.
actually being watched and made in the proper form. Like, it is so high risk. And they are making it to where it mimics other highs now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is totally going to create a whole world of chaos in the addiction world.
Yeah. Do you think there's more effort that needs to be made by the state to try to prevent the amount of drugs that are available to people on the street?
I think there's always more effort to be made. I don't necessarily know that it's on the state. I think it's on all of us as a whole
Mm-hmm.
in our communities. Some people know stuff or see stuff and they just don't, they want to judge. They want to talk bad. They don't want to give a hand out to say, hey, like, I will show you where to go for some services or something. Nope. Instead, they want to blast it on Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and bash this guy they just seen on the corner that they assume, and maybe that person's there for mental health, not even drugs.
Yeah.
But I think the state could definitely do more. I know funding is a huge issue. Like, if we had more funding, we could have more people working in these positions, reaching more people and helping with services, or more beds for people to go to for detox or inpatient.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just not a whole lot of options out there.
I thought about getting into sober livings because, like, I'm a real estate person, and the idea was first brought to me by somebody that had been in a sober living. Now they were wanting to do it for the wrong reason. Like they thought that they could make just shitloads of money.
There's no money anywhere in this field.
Right.
Nowhere.
Well, I guess like this person had done some sober living stuff out in like California. And I think it's a little bit more lucrative out there, something to do with drug testing and like people's
And
urine.
being California sober.
Right. Yeah. Like they kind of explained it to me like, oh, you can make all this money, like something to do with the drug testing and people's pee. There's something to do with that. But then I heard that you could just you could buy a house and just rent out to people who are trying to get sober, and then you hire a house manager and they just kind of take care of everybody and then they just pay you. And I'm like, well, that doesn't sound too bad. Like that'd be kind of cool.
So I actually manage 4 houses and 2 apartments here in Union. And I have several friends who also are like involved in it. It is a lot of work because you're wanting to make sure these people have what they need. They have safe housing. They're not influencing bad on the others. So you really want to make sure the environment stays okay. But it has changed people's lives. I couldn't number of people that have come through our program who is living a different life, who's gotten their own place to live, gotten their kids back, done all these things.
Right.
Mind you, we've also tied in the treatment part, the peer support part. Like we've connected them to full wraparound services to make sure that they have what they need, and we have them going to self-help meetings.
Right.
But it's definitely, there's a huge need. My list stays the length of my forearm.
I think there needs to be, and I think you would agree, that for the people who are out of prison, they went through the programs, and now it's time to start adult life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's like a whole nother hard part,
Yeah.
because, if you've been on drugs for 20 years, you haven't been an adult really. I mean, you've done some adult things, you've been out there, but you don't know how to prosper,
Yeah.
and a lot of people, you know, being successful and like, all the how to be financially successful, you know, how do those people start to bridge that gap? It's one thing to go and have a job, but like some people, may not be cut out for that, you know.
So I know, just with some of the people I can think about, like we work on people on a personal level. Some people, we're teaching them how to read again because
Right.
they didn't know or they forgot. I couldn't read when I first got clean. Like it was
Right.
impossible to process that. There's a lot of people we work on budgets with, and we help them look for places they can afford or make smart decisions. Like,
Hmm.
okay, you have an interview in Pacific, but you live in Union. Can you physically get to Pacific every day, or is that going to be a new barrier and struggle? Like,
Right.
let's pull that back. So we kind of start working with them on those things. And a lot of people do have homes and stuff because we worked on opening that first bank account because they didn't understand
Yeah.
how vital in today's day you have to have a bank account, and
Yeah.
savings account and how to pay certain things or live within your means. Like those are all things that have to be
Well, that was kind of
learned.
something that I was thinking, like, hey, maybe that's a way that I could help, is
Hmm.
if I opened up these sober livings. But then I was also kind of a part of it, and I could come in and, talk to certain people who are, just looking for, like, hey, obviously, like, I can't help people who are a little bit more extreme, on their struggle, but there's probably a fair amount of people who are capable of like running their own business and stuff like that, where I could provide some like motivation.
Hmm.
um and it might be because like I said, I've been to the programs, and I've seen a lot of these people, and I know that I can't help everybody,
Yeah.
but there are people there that I could probably work with and kind of explain some things, like, hey, when you get out of here, you know when you get your first paycheck, here's how to start. Like, you need to run a program. Like, your life needs to become um day to day. You don't want to be chaos and random.
And there's not a lot of reentry programs. And unfortunately, also, when people get through several, like some of my guys will be with me 2 years, some with
Hmm.
me 60 days. But at the end of it, there's not a lot of housing options for people who have criminal history, who have been to DOC, who
Hmm.
have these charges, who don't have a credit score because they've never worked on it. So
Right.
nobody wants to rent to them because of what their paperwork looks like,
Yeah.
not because of who the person is.
Like, and that was kind of my thing, is like, I know there's some people that got some hustle in there that I could help. It's like, hey, I know you probably got a felony, and I know that your credit score is probably fucked. But as long as you can talk straight and look the part, like, I can help you, be a little bit more successful than a 9 to 5 at a factory.
Well, and I think people in recovery, no matter what you're recovering from, are the coolest and most stable and being consistent and dependable people after they've reached, we'll say, like that 9 month milestone
Right.
and anything past that, because we have so much gratitude because somebody is giving us a shot and we can hold a job and we don't have to worry about where we're going to get $5 for gas because
Right.
we're learning how to juggle those things. Keeping insurance on our car. Oh my God, that was such a huge deal for me.
Right.
So when we can start appreciating that, we become so determined and motivated to just do the right thing. And we do become some of the hardest workers and most willing people there are in the community.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100%, because, like, you know, take that same energy that you used to get high and just apply it to like something a little bit more productive.
Even just half of it,
Yeah. It's like, imagine that, you know, the money you need to make today is your drug. We got to go, fight for that, you know.
And you learn how to love yourself through that.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a fair amount of people who are going through these programs that feel like, becoming even semi financially free is probably not something they're ever going to be able to do. And it's not that hard.
It's, I mean, it's not. It takes consistency and it does take a
Mm-hmm.
lot of work. I can tell you when I got into recovery, I had two goals. Well, three. One was to not die,
Mm-hmm.
one was to not use, and one was to be a mom. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't actually think I would ever get my kids back, but I knew I wanted to be a part of their life. Right? So if I had stayed just at those three goals when I got clean,
Mm-hmm.
I would not be where I'm at today if that was my only focus. But today I
Right.
own a home, I own cars, my kids have cars. You know, I have a career, I have people that trust me. Like the amount of freedom I have to live life and be grateful and happy, even on my worst days, because life happens,
Mm-hmm.
is just beyond me. But it's because of the things I learned how to do for myself in the process.
Right.
Most of that I had to have somebody else show me, or I did a lot of Googling. Did a
Right.
whole lot of Googling, you know, but having the ways and means to learn more, to live more,
Mm-hmm.
has been a game changer for me.
Yeah. And that was just, I figured, hey, this might be a way I could, help out to some degree. Because, like, for one, I've been in some of these programs. I know people who have struggled way worse than me. And, I've pulled myself out of some bad places. And it'd be kind of cool to help some people.
It's kind of like being a peer sport. That's exactly
Right.
what it is, honestly. And so many of us already do it without realizing like that's what we're doing. So it is definitely needed. I definitely encourage it.
Yeah.
And there's trainings and stuff out there for it. I'm kind of a resource connection. I like to make sure I know as much as possible to help build up as much as possible. So I can always help you navigate that if you ever.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that I'm going to focus on within the next year is to get maybe a couple of houses that will support that. Because, I mean, obviously real estate is expensive right now. And a 2-bedroom, 1-bath probably isn't the best house for one. You want to get something that's
Probably want at least a
sizable.
3-bedroom. Because
Yeah.
also it's really for them to learn how to be a family. That's what they do in those homes. They learn how to be
Yeah.
a family that like they've never had, and they learn how to have unity and look out for each other. Of course, there's sometimes animosity or they know each other from their past, but a lot of times they overcome that through the process.
Yeah.
And the problems kind of weed themselves out, and then the strength within that program is just so beautiful.
Yeah. No, I hope that, I drug addiction in this country is just like it's so mind blowing to me. That it's been allowed to even get as bad as it is, and it's obviously a top down problem. It's really not. You can't pin a whole lot of the problem on the people using the drugs, because they shouldn't really even be that readily available. I feel like this country needs to do more to stop the inflow of drugs to the community. The I don't know 100% how you would do that. I know that,
So I know one way they can start is maybe it's not necessarily figuring out how to stop, but it's decreasing the cost of the things people need for treatment, decreasing the cost of the medications they need,
right.
because those are $1,500, $2,000, and if a person doesn't have insurance, they're just
Yeah.
unless they can come into a program like ours or something, they're just asked out really. So decreasing the cost of the medications that helps to take somebody through withdrawal or stay sober, decreasing the cost of beds. Like
Yeah.
I watched a training. These people came and presented about their facility and their treatment options. $60,000 for a month. People can't
Yeah.
afford that. Like that's
Right.
insane to me.
That's and I like I said earlier, there was somebody that was talking about how you could make all this money through drug addiction on the backs of, I guess, people and their insurance. I don't want to do that. I guess there's money to be made, doing it that style. But yeah, that's a problem. That
Yeah,
seems
most of them
that
don't even
seems
have
like
insurance.
yeah, it seems like exploitation. $60,000 for a bed. You can buy a really nice bed for that.
Yeah, yeah, half a house.
But I fentanyl is a serious problem. It seems almost more like a weapon to me. Like that is, they put that stuff out on the street, and when you really look at like where it's coming from, where it originates and how it gets here, the channel from where it comes from till it gets into somebody's system, it seems like a much more sinister thing than just somebody getting high. It seems like it's almost a weapon to me when you
Well,
really go deep on it.
I mean, and really for anybody who's trying to make money too, it is a weapon also because we become chemically dependent on it, right?
Yeah.
So we need more, so we're going to be buying more. And the amount of people that have overdosed off crack and off meth thinking that that was what they were putting in their body,
Mhm.
not knowing it was cut with fentanyl, is just
Yeah.
unreal. And I know a big question for people is why would drug dealers want to kill people who are going to buy their drugs? Well, that's not the goal.
Mhm.
For every one person that just died, they just got 7 more new people to keep buying more.
Right.
And it's unfortunate. I don't know how many people have been revived through Narcan that thought they were just using meth. And it's like,
Right.
this would not work if it was only meth related.
Yeah. No, it's a scary time to be out there using, and it's not gonna get any better. So, my advice to people is just don't even get involved with it. But some people, like that was the whole point of our conversation was like, this shit started for you when you were a child. You didn't even know any better. You know, like what do we do for those people? That are gonna come up. How many kids are out there right now that their home life is chaotic as shit, and they're gonna go down the same path and get involved in the same thing, and you know.
I think the blessing is though now is there's more open conversations around it. Like when I was a kid and I was using, we were hiding in basements.
Mhm.
It wasn't as prevalent. People weren't talking about it. It was a big secret.
Yeah.
Now people are aware and people are trying to do things. I know I hear my kids talk about stuff that their friends are going through and like their parents' addiction. Narcan was like against the rules when I was using. I know Prevent Ed, we've put up some vending machines for free Narcan in different places in the county that also have some other, necessities in those vending machines as well that create discretion. So,
Yeah.
like there's availability to help keep someone alive and to hopefully they get what they need to get better.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I want to do with this podcast and interviewing people who have been through it. Like I interview a whole bunch of different people. I've interviewed people that were on my 600-pound life. I've interviewed UFC fighters, and I'll continue to interview whoever I feel like has a decent story. But I have a more of a tug, and more of a connection with people who have been through the addiction and just a wild upbringing, because it's like for me it's just a little bit more interesting. Like, yeah, I love fighting and stuff like that, and a story's a story. But with this, I've seen it and I've experienced it, and I think that bringing some, like you said, people talk about it more, there's more open discussion, and like the more interviews like this that are out there that people can see and kind of go, oh, I didn't never thought of it like that, or I didn't, maybe an interview like this will help people see you and other people differently, that you're not drug addicts and bad people, that like you're just like everybody else, just product of environment. And that's like the biggest thing that I can do with this podcast and these types of interviews, is just show the world that like, hey, this is what they went through. Take it how it is. Just listen to it.
Carrying the message.
Yeah, just listen to it. I don't know if you've ever watched like Soft White Underbelly on YouTube. You should check it out. They interview some crazy people on there. What the guy does is he's on like Skid Row in California or whatever, and he'll just go grab a random person and say, hey, come here, and they'll just like start going. And that was like, when I started watching that, I was like, there's a lot of people like that in Franklin County.
There is a lot of people like that in Franklin County. And I think that tug that you talk about is called empathy.
Yeah, I don't like to admit it, but
and I think that's what makes it easiest to have those conversations, is because when you can empathize with somebody, not sympathize, but empathize with somebody.
Right.
It creates that trust for them to be able to open up a little more.
Yeah, and I think we need more of that.
Mhm.
Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
Uh,
Any other stories you want to share?
no, I don't think so.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it up. We're in about an hour. Well, hour and a half. All right. Well, like I said, I want to thank you again for coming on, Kenna Joe. What's your last name?
Belle,
Kenna Joe Bell.
Yep.
I'm Joe Davis. Nice
thanks
to
for
meet you.
having me. Nice to meet you.
You're welcome. No, I think you're doing a great thing. And it sounds like you're helping a lot of people that probably didn't think they would ever get help or ever want help. So it's a big deal. I'm glad that I was able to get you on here. And you know, I want to interview a lot more people, kind of around this subject, just to hear what people have gone through. And I think that, you know, like we said, people need to hear it, you know, so that we can get a different viewpoint on addiction and how we view people who have struggled with that. And, you know, because if you're not talking about it or you have a bad, like, view of it, you're not going to want to do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, and the crazy part, the part that blows my mind is, you know, people who never think it's going to be a part of their story and then their kid goes through it or something. We're
Right.
the ones they reach out to. The
Yeah.
ones they judged all those years, but the people who can help their child the best are the ones who've been through it.
Right.
You know, so just you know, at that point, then their opinions change, but because they need something from us.
Right.
But whatever it takes, I'm open-minded as long as we can start changing the direction of those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you know, we'll definitely talk some more, and maybe you can send some more people my way that got some interesting stories. I'm supposed to interview like a CO, somebody that was in a prison, and I have a friend of mine that was also a nurse at a prison for a while, so they got some interesting stories. But yeah, the addiction thing, you know, just a wild life, and it's so hardcore. And you know, to see people be in the deepest, darkest pit of addiction and then pull themselves out and come back, and you know, not only get themselves right, but be able to help other people do it and start this whole, you know, network of thing. It's really cool. So I'm glad that you came on and we got to talk to you today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Well, we'll wrap it up with that.
Back in it, baby, just stay in town. I'm on the edge, I ain't coming down. I get too high, I'm afraid of the ground. I'm young and I'm paid.